editor for the agricultural publication For Mzansi. And as you can see, we're getting ready to do a live. We're joined by one of the key players in the Department of Agriculture, and he's going to join us in the next few minutes. I'll introduce him shortly. Let me just try and find. There's my guest. There's my guest. Go live. Hello to everyone who's waving, joining us, tuning in. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Are you in Cape Town? That's where I'm from. Are you joining us from Pretoria? Are you joining us from Ghana? Are you joining us from Zambia? Where in the country or the continent or the world are you joining us from? Like I said, for those of you maybe who just tuned in, my name is Duncan Wasiwa, assistant editor for the agricultural publication For Mzansi, and we're getting ready to look at food security. Now, I'm quite interested to know what you guys know about food security in South Africa. What is your understanding about our food security status in South Africa? Do you understand how food security is measured? Do you understand the policy changes that has been implemented that could affect you either as a consumer or as a farmer or a producer or even an agro-processor? That is exactly what we are going to be talking about. Hello to everyone. I hear there's Bloemfontein, Lumka 3710 from Bloemfontein. There's another Bloemfontein joining us, Nina. Hello, Nina. There's a Potchefstroom. Yay. There's a Potchefstroom. There's a Pretoria, Fizeka. Thank you for joining us. And there's our guest. Awesome. Can you hear me?
Thank you, and love and clear. Good afternoon to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I was just gossiping about you, telling them that you'll be joining us in the next few minutes. We're having obviously a conversation about food security, which is quite a serious conversation for platforms such as Instagram. But I hope our listeners and our audience will join us in having this conversation and ask questions as much as they'd like to. Thank you so much. Of course, the gentleman that you are seeing on your screen is Mr. Nasele Mehlomakulu, who is the Deputy Director General for Food Security and Agrarian Reform at the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. How are you doing, sir?
I'm super good, Duncan. Thank you for hosting me. And how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How's your Friday going? How's the Friday at the office? Is it we ready to go home, or are we still pushing very much hard?
With the current food security issues in the country, there is no Friday here. It's like Monday.
That's such a rehearsed response. No, thank you so much for being here with us today. Definitely excited to be having this conversation with you. Of course, over the past year, there's been some changes in South Africa's food security, strides that have made, challenges that we've seen in terms of food security, policy changes, natural disasters that have occurred, global phenomena that have also impacted access to food, affordability of food, and a lot of this, of course, impacts communities at large scale. For those of you who are trickling in, we're having a conversation on food security, and we're joined by the Deputy Director General for Food Security and Agrarian Reform in the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. That is Mr. Nasele Mehlomakulu. Now, let's get straight into it. As a consumer, this is a question that I've been having for quite some time. How is food security rather measured in the country? What metrics are used? Maybe let's start there so we're all on the same page.
Very, very important question, Duncan, because food security at times can be misunderstood. And I'm going to request you to edit that question and include in it the very complex argument around nutrition. Because as a country, we talk about...
maybe just speak a bit louder or move closer to the mic, because it is a bit soft on your end. I just want to make sure that everyone can actually hear you loud and clear. If you are able to hear Mr. Nasele loud and clear, let us know in the comments. If you are struggling, let us know. I just want to make sure that everyone is actually able to enjoy and engage in the conversation. Let's take it again.
Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, great. I was saying, allow me to amend your question and introduce into it the complex argument around nutrition, because as a country we talk about food and nutrition security, and this is very important so that the complexity of the topic we're discussing is well understood. Luckily, as a country, this is enriched in our constitution. Section 27(1)(b) of the country is on access to food and water. By the way, just to inform your audience, how many of us are aware that food is the third basic human need, third only from air and water? So this is a very important topic we're talking about. Now, if you look at the UN and the FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization, there is a globally acclaimed and understood definition of food security, food and nutrition security. Here we are measuring it at an individual level. That's why I introduced the issues of nutritional aspect into it. It is measured at a household level. You will then move to the national level, and this is where now in our country you hear a lot of people talking about food security at national. I mean, South Africa at national level being food secure. However, at the household and individual level, it's a different story. We also look at it at a regional level and globally. So this definition that looks at things like having physical access to this food, that must be nutritious, that must be there for you to live your active and healthy life for as long as we live, becomes what we do. So as a country, to harmonize this phenomenon and concept of food security, we then established what we call South African Vulnerability Assessment Committee. And this committee took already well-known metrics and indicators globally to really start measuring the topic of food security. We're looking at the six dimensions of food security, but before that, we had four. Of that four, we introduced two dimensions recently, that of sustainability as well as the agency. But the first one I want to talk to is the food availability, which really is all about a country being able to have adequate food for its citizens, whether it's through production or whether it's through imports. So that has to be measured. The second one is the sustainability of that supply. When the food is available, it must be continuously available. We also look at the topic of how the food is used, the consumption patterns. And then I spoke about the two that were introduced. And the last one, which is key here, is access. A food being available does not automatically translate to it being you gaining access to it and being able to have that balance meal. So you gain this access through two forms. One is through your own production or through economic means. Economic means then relates to your disposable income in your pocket, your buying power, for you to be able to go out there and purchase this food. Two issues I want to quickly run through is your macro and socioeconomic aspects that also play a role in how food security is dealt with. Here you're dealing with the issues of GDP growth and therefore the issue of food inflation, which has been very topical recently, and access to basic services like your potable water and sanitation and basic health services. Those are having a direct effect in terms of how food is handled. If you look also about the question of food safety and all of that. You spoke about shocks and hazards, a very important issue that we look at in the topic of food security, whether it's geopolitical issues, whether it's climate-induced ones, or the pandemic that we recently came from, and and other global disruptions that affect our food systems and food value chains. Now, you asked me to break this down for you in terms of these matrix that we're looking at. So without being scientific about it, as I said, it's a complex topic that we are discussing here. You have what we call a food consumption score. We have what we call the household dietary diversity scale. We look at the spending on food, which basically is about cost of the calories that you have to go and buy. We're looking at the coping strategy index that people have to adapt as and when the consumption behaviors have to change, and also the food security index. Two familiar ones that we like and we've used. By the way, we just recently concluded a survey nationwide, the first of its kind in the country, conducted by the HSRC, where we look across all 9 provinces, what currently is the status of food insecurity. So there we use the household food insecurity and access scale, as well as the household hunger scale. Just to try to break it down for your audience, just 2 or 3 of these indicators without taking too much of the time. If you look at your household hunger scale, here you've got a score from 0 to 1, and excuse me, and if that household is at that scale or score, it means there is very much little or no food insecurity issues there. You're well off, you're good. But then moving from 2 to 3 in your household hunger scale, this is where now we're looking at your moderate hunger levels, where perhaps at certain times of the day you don't really have food. And 4 to 6 is where the problem is, because now you're looking at the severe hunger. So when we then answer these questionnaires and trying to track these issues, this is what we're using. The other one quickly is your household food insecurity access score, as I said. Here you're looking at your household behavioral and psychological changes. What does the household do when they are confronted with the issue of food insecurity? Do they reduce the number of meals per day? Have breakfast, skip lunch and have dinner? Or do they reduce the quantity of the food on their plate as they consume? In other words, if you were in your breakfast, you were having 2 eggs, now you go around and say, no, look, I'm going to only have 1 because I've got constraints in terms of buying more. So that we'll look at. The important thing, again, linked to the issue of nutritional aspect of this is your dietary diversity score. In other words, what's in your plate? Do you have what we call your 5 colors, or is just a staple certain food throughout the day, which then will mean you're missing some of the basic nutrients and vitamins that you need from your food? So these are the indicators we're using to measure food security in the country. But of course, we can never leave out the question of the economics, the money to go and buy this food. You will recall that UN talks about US dollar, $2 per day, in some region $1.5 per day, and bring it back home. We looked at the Stats SA last year. It gave us a index that talks about 3 of them basically. You got the upper boundary poverty line, you've got your food poverty line, and as well as you got the lower poverty line. In this, then we're talking about 663 rand per month for anyone to be able to go and afford the basic food basket. So if you don't have food that you produce on your own, and then in your disposable income, you don't have this 663 rand a month to be able to then buy this food, then you fall into that trap of food insecurity. Of course, the upper poverty line in this, the State SA puts it at just over 1,417 rand per month for us to be able to do this. So in summarizing your question, then to say at the country level, nationwide, we've got sufficient food. The issue is just affordability, and that means access to food. Thanks there, Duncan.
Thank you so much for that. And, it's based on what you're saying, it sounds to me that as consumers, we have quite a lot of influence when it comes to the status of food security in a country, specifically now South Africa, in terms of how our consumer habits change, what we decide to eat, when we decide to eat. Does that play a big, was it a big factor when it comes to the status of food security in the country?
Absolutely. And this is
Sure.
why even through our research institution, through ARC, we are now even looking at what is classified as indigenous foods. We want to broaden the basic food basket, because there are other food items that are very rich in nutrients that are typically not counted in your typical Western plate, so to speak. And we want to introduce those and also encourage our farmers on the ground to really go back to what we used to eat. From where I'm from, we would eat umfino, and you go to other areas, they'll talk about cassava and others. Those are very rich nutrient food that we really have to go back to.
Most definitely in that Food for Mzansi, we champion indigenous foods. There's definitely a need for conversations around that as well, but we're not here for that. For those of you just tuned in or trickled in, we're having a conversation about food security in the country, the status of food security, looking at what has happened over the past year, policy changes, the impact of natural disasters on the status of food security, and what you as a farmer or consumer should know about what and how the status of South Africa's food security impacts you. Kiama, I think there was someone who was saying early on, Kiama, she couldn't hear you properly. I figured it out. If I mute on my side, we are able to hear we are able to hear our guests much clearer. So I think I'll do that going forward. My next question, obviously COVID-19 has had a big impact on not just our economy, but also consumers' ability to afford food. What are your researchers saying? How has that shifted over the past year, 2 years? Are we seeing positive shifts? Are people back in the stores? What does that look like?
Before I respond to that, allow me just to reflect on this traumatic period in our human existence that has left scars of which we will remain with us for decades to come. We continue to remember those that perished through this pandemic, and some of which their livelihoods were eroded by the pandemic, and therefore their families really struggling. It really was a time we really wish it will never happen again. But in terms of our sector, you will recall that when we were hit by this pandemic, as a sector, among others, the cabinet took a very pronounced decision to classify agriculture as an essential service. That played a very significant role in ensuring that we continue to do that which we do, ensuring food availability for the country. And we were very resilient through that period. Our sector made a positive contribution to our GDP while others were declining. And also a few of the programs we introduced, like your safety nets, if you might call them that, to really cushion the most vulnerable households to the impact of this pandemic, like your COVID-19 relief fund we ran as a department, and you look at your presidential employment stimulus initiatives also, that really played a positive role in trying to assist in this regard. And this is not my view. This is the view shared by researchers, as you're asking what are they saying us. This is the view shared by a number of commentators in the sector. And they even go as further to say, if we did not introduce these programs, we could have seen food-related riots in the country, which we were able to avert because of these interventions. Of course, notwithstanding what happened during 2021 in some parts of KZN and Gauteng, which of course were not really food-related riots, but we all know what triggered those. I won't go into that. So our researchers then inform us that we have built resilience, and we have built an agile sector, even through the worst possible storms. And we take pride on that. However, challenges remain. As you're saying, the food affordability in the country is still a challenge. The food inflation, as we saw recently, hence the prominence on the topic of food security today is because of that. So a number of food of households are still experiencing food insecurity across the country. This is evident from the general household surveys that is conducted by State SA. It also reflects on the national survey that I referenced earlier. And when we launch the result of that survey, we will definitely extend the invitation to Food for Mzansi and, of course, other media houses to reflect on our findings, because it's the first of its kind, as I said, in the country, and we really drilled deep at a household level what's happening there. So we observe the burden of malnutrition, which really hasn't changed. We are observing the hidden hunger, the questions on overweight, obesities, all these due to the consumption of nutrient-poor diets. If you look at the levels of stunting, the levels of wasting, especially at your children under the age of 5, those challenges are there. And recently, from the Global Food Security Report, where we're looking at the SDGs and how we're faring towards achieving those, it's very clear, not just as a country or a continent, but as a world, that we're not going to be able to achieve as things stand at this rate, ending hunger, SDG number 2, by year 2030. And therefore, that means we have to double our efforts to get the things done. There are other related challenges like domestic issues. If you look at your issues of load shedding, that really is disrupting. We appreciate the efforts made by Cabinet in trying to address this. This is exactly why our own minister introduced the Agro Energy Fund, that really is beginning also to try and help farmers to diversify off-grid and to alternative energy sources. In that way, you're then minimizing the impact on the food security. Our sector, as we all know, is really a job-intensive sector. We're happy to see since 2020 to this year that we have created about 52,000 new jobs in the sector, while maintaining our year-to-year average of about 850,000 jobs. So for us, this is good, and it also assists in terms of dealing with the issue of food security when you talk about access and therefore affordability. Another challenge, like just in closing on this question, highlight is higher than ideal percentage of our land, parcels of land that remains under less than optimal production levels. And this is something we really are confronting head on as a department to try and ensure that we use available resources to really take our people out of poverty and food insecurity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being so detailed with your response. Just a reminder, this is a conversation around food security, looking at the status of food security in the country, looking at the past year, the challenges that have been, major developments and shifts that we are seeing. We'll get into that a bit more in a moment. I had a couple of people requesting to join, so I won't be accepting that. But if you do have a question, I saw you in Tabi and I saw you, Nina. If you do have a question, you are more than welcome to pop that in the comment section. If you want to participate or engage in the conversation, we will be opening up the floor for those questions, but I won't be accepting any requests. Let us know who is joining. I'm quite interested to know who's in the audience. Is it consumers? Is it farmers? Are you processors? What exactly is your link or interest in the agricultural sector? It would be great to know that. Remember, it is an open platform, so you're more than welcome to pose those questions in the comment section. I'd like to know, have there been any major developments or policy shifts or events related to food security in the country over the past sector, more especially changes that could affect food producers and maybe even consumers?
Yes, absolutely. You know that last year we signed and put into action a sector plan, which is our agriculture and agriculture master plan, which really represents a collaborative effort between government, the industry, the social partners, for us to revitalize and restructure our agricultural sector for inclusive growth. the authors like Wandile Sehlobo out there, who has a book now that talks about the world of true agriculture in South Africa. So in now the year we're coming out, we've been journeying towards the implementation of this plan, where we have developed and continue to do so, develop the production schemes. These basically are your commodity-specific schemes that we want to use to streamline production processes. We want to use them to improve quality, enhance overall inclusiveness of our sector, so that as we grow and set to achieve the targets on the AMP, we're improving the food security and also those that were left behind before we introduced the plan. The second area I can mention around this place is the value chain roundtables that we are establishing, again, as a platform of stakeholders within the value chains that are discussing roles and responsibilities on exactly how, as a sector, we're just coming out of winning the Rugby World Cup and a very powerful slogan, stronger together. So these value chain roundtables are exactly like that, a platform to bring all the role players together on the table to collaborate and engage on various factors that are affecting our sector and the very addition along the lane. Another issue that we're expanding, Minister this year relaunched the blended funding instrument with the Land Bank. You know the difficulty of our smallholder farmers accessing funding from our funding institutions. This is our blended scheme that now we really are broadening to ensure that we leverage on the private sector investment and make sure that currently faced with the fiscal constraints we have as government, we are able to bring in the private investors in the sector, and this is taking off very well, and we're pleased to see the positive impact around that point.
Thank you so much. There's some comments coming through, people letting us know where they are joining us from, letting us know who they are. We've got Tiny T87 says, I am a director responsible for land tenure security of farm dwellers in the country. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do send us a DM on Food for Mzansi. We'd love to connect with you rather, and hear more about the work that you do. We have another Ezilalini. I hope I said that correct. Ezilalini Eats, who's a farmer. Again, DM us, let us know what it is that you do. It would be interesting to hear what you do, where in the country, and maybe even profile you on Food for Mzansi. Thank you so much. My final question, I suppose, and it definitely has been an insightful conversation for me. Also, just better understanding how much impact as consumers we have when it comes to food security in the country, and I think that's also an important discussion to have. What is the department's key priorities in the coming year? We've talked about the challenges that have been this year, the challenges that can continue to exist, but what are your key priorities going forward in 2024?
Thanks, Duncan. First, allow me to indicate that at the 52nd session of the Committee on World Food Security held last month in Rome, our country was elected the chair of this global forum that discusses the issue of food security. And we extend our congratulations to Her Excellency Nosipho Jezili, our ambassador in Italy, that will take this very important 2-year term to discuss the question of food security, not just for the country, but globally. I'm mentioning this because this is a perfect platform for us as a country and a continent at that global level to start influencing and taking advantage to deal with the domestic issues of food security. And this is a priority we definitely will not miss, to ensure that we set our agenda out there and we pursue and make sure that this gets done. The second point at a strategic level that one would want to mention is the fact that we are now initiating a process to develop a legislation for food and nutrition security in South Africa. Currently, we have a cabinet-approved policy, but we don't have an act and that deals with the issue of food security. And this is very critical and important for us. We are forging ahead with the establishment of the National Council for Food and Nutrition Security. Again, the policy and the plan that we're coming to an end here has already requested of us to establish a council that will bring all stakeholders. As I said, food security is multi-dimensional, very complex, and therefore it cuts across a number of stakeholders. And this council will really assist us to get things moving. In terms of providing support, our policy, our national policy on the comprehensive support to producers is en route to cabinet. Very key for us because it begins to consolidate all our currently available funding instruments for us to be able to have an impact at scale on how we provide our support to producers, linking them to their various categories, so that it's very clear if you're a subsistence or smallholder, what exactly is your package, and if you're the next level and so forth. So that policy for us is very keen. We are also looking at formalizing what we call institutional markets. These are important for marketing purposes for subsistence farmers. By such markets are referred to things like your national school feeding scheme, for example, you're supplying food to the army, hospitals, and related. And you can't talk about no market for our producers if you institutionalize these markets, and there's a definite target and a program to help them move with that. So that is on the cards. Another area we're looking at is we're looking at moving away from your demand-driven approach in providing support to the most vulnerable households to a more of a supply-driven one. A Makoko somewhere in the deep rural of Limpopo will hardly apply for our services if she has that backyard garden, and we're saying we'll only assist you if you apply. With the survey that now we have from HSRC on the state of food and nutrition in the country, we have flagged these pressure points that now we want to be deliberate in designing programs that are going to be geared towards ensuring that those pockets of areas that are still red in food security now are lifted out of poverty. And that for us is important. Lastly, we've witnessed last week from the cabinet the decision to crack down on the spaza shops that are selling fake or expired goods and the development thereof to assist to deal with this issue. It's very important, and we always say, if it is not safe, it is not food. Thank you.
Definitely an important point that you highlight there. We've got a question over here just before we go. It's from vibing_ with the IBIS. I think that's how I say it. The question is there a plan to bridge not just food security, but nutrition security in the country? And I suppose it's a quite important conversation to have. You know, there's a big focus in agriculture, you know, to ensure, you know, that we produce and we harvest as much yields as possible. But is our food nutritious? That's another question. So that's what vibing_ is talking about. So is there a plan to bridge this, and, you know, not just looking at filling bellies, but keeping people actually healthy and nutritious?
You were cutting.
Nasele, are you
there, Duncan?
Is it?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can hear you. Did you hear my question?
I think the essence of the question was about the nutritional aspect of food. Is that correct? Great. This is exactly why in my, responding to your very first question, I deliberately threw in that aspect, because as a country, we're not just talking about food security, we say food and nutrition. And that's why we have a Department of Health, for example. That's why we have social development through their social safety nets. One might not link these things, but any grant that is going out there, whether it's a 350 COVID relief grant, it's a safety net to help someone to go and access food and diversified food for them to be able to live a healthy life. So if you go to health, then we talk about food fortification, for example, where now you also try to introduce critical vitamins in certain staples that people are eating. That all deals with the issue of nutritional aspect. And when I spoke about the matrix and that were used to measure food, I also spoke about the 5 colors on your dietary diversity scale, where it's not just about eating breakfast to lunch. You need to have diversified food, and therefore the nutritional aspects comes in. So we measure that very well, and it's very important, because without that, there is no food security.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nasele Mehlomakulu, who is the Deputy Director General for Food Security and Agrarian Reform in the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Much appreciated. There is a million other questions that we could be asking you, but because of time constraints, we have to leave it there. If possible, I'd like to recap this conversation with you again next year, so that we can just take it, look at a bit deeper aspects when it comes to food security and nutrition in our country. But once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much to you and to For Mzansi for hosting us. It was very interesting to engage with you and your audience. Until we meet next time, thank you very much.
Definitely. For our audience, thank you so much for also staying tuned in. You'll definitely see a write-up of this conversation on www.foodformzansi.co.za. You'll also hear a snippet of it on our podcast platform, which is the Farmers Inside Track platform. If you haven't seen, we've been posting that it is our birthday month. We are celebrating 5 years in the industry. We're having a big event in Joburg very soon. So make sure that you stay tuned or glued to our social media platforms to find out how you can also participate in our upcoming birthday celebration. From me, happy Friday and goodbye.